branching from sleep into other factors, we're looking at heart health, we're looking at stress, we're looking at all these elements and starting to look at the science that would give us the opportunity to be not just a fitness tracker, which I think is what most people think of when they think wearable, but something that's like your 24/7 health companion.
Welcome back to the Fit Insider podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Tom Hale, CEO of Oura. In this episode, we talk about Tom's experience leading growth stage startups, how his personal health journey led him to discover Oura and ultimately take this role. Plus, he explains why wearables will transform healthcare as we know it. Let's get into it. Hi, Tom. Welcome to Fit Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
It's good to meet you. Good to connect. A lot to talk about as you now about 6 months or so stepping into the CEO role at Oura. I think a lot of folks listening are familiar with the company, might not know you as well. So could you take a second, just introduce yourself and talk about the opportunity now that you're kind of ramping up into?
It's a great lead in because I come to Aura from maybe a non-traditional fitness background, mostly as a fitness enthusiast and somebody who's tried every wearable. But really, what actually happened is last fall, I had a pretty stressful time between work and personal life and a variety of circumstances, and I stopped sleeping well. And that happened to intersect with the time that I came across Aura and they were looking for a new CEO. And I went through a process of actually recovering my sleep. And, lo and behold, the product actually really helped me get my sleep back in gear. And in doing that, I was like, wow, this is a company I need to be involved in. This is a product that changes people's lives because I guarantee you, I'm sure you know this, but like when you have a sleep problem, there are a few things in life that will make your life worse than that. And then when you can get good sleep, man, it helps everything be much better. So I came to it from that way. I started in March. So I've been here 6 months. And for me, it's a personal mission as well as a professional mission.
Yeah, and then quite a extensive background, entrepreneurship, technology, now coming into this maybe more kind of mission driven or personal driven experience. Can you talk about maybe how that your experience kind of you looked at this opportunity and said, "Hey, I see how I could step in here and maybe have an impact on the company certainly, but provide this leadership as Aura gets into a new phase of growth and really getting to that place where it's like, hey, we can transform the health of people around the world."
For sure. The mission driven aspect of it was really critical. But as I looked at the maybe the intersection of my background and the company, there were a couple of things that really jumped out, which is Aura is scaling. We're growing quite rapidly. We just crossed 1 million users, rings sold earlier in the year. We're growing like a weed. That's a very kind of relevant part of it because most of my time has been spent at companies between 200 and 2,000 employees. Aura is about 500 employees right now, so we're right in that sweet spot. Second thing is that it was on, I guess, about a year ago when the company introduced its subscription model. And I spent most of my life in and around subscription businesses and thinking about how they worked. So that was a natural fit. And then as somebody who has sort of built businesses that start to scale geographically, there was also this global element. But from a personal standpoint and from a mission driven standpoint, or as a leader in sleep, and in many ways that kind of intersected with thinking about how sleep is one foundation of health, but there's lots of other ways that a wearable tracker that's helping you understand the signals that your body's telling you, it can be really relevant. And so I started thinking about the inverting the paradigm of healthcare. Instead of going to the doctor and being told what your vital signs are, why don't you understand your vital signs and know how they're changing and have an application that's supporting you that so you can take a charge and have agency in your own healthcare journey. And when I started digging into it, it was really interesting to me, this notion of continuous data collection and collecting data. I mean, there are people at Aura who have 5 years of data. And that's a unique data set. Like who on the planet has 5 years of data about their body every day, taken in a really great controlled setting, which is overnight, right? Your body's at rest. There's not like exogenous signals like, temperature changing or activity or something that you ate. You're kind of at a good steady state. It's a great time to take a reading on your body. But if you've got 5 years of data, think about applying the power of machine learning to those 5 years of data and understand what the outcomes and inferences you might make from that. I mean, I think that's a really unique and interesting opportunity. And that really got me super excited. As I said, I was like, I got to be a part of this company.
Yeah. There's this idea, right? So Aura has been around for years at this point. I forget the exact timing, but it was like the 2010s kind of getting started and then making the way to the United States and getting funding. And now it feels like a huge inflection point during COVID. Like, hey, we can use these devices to track our health. We can use these devices for prevention to some extent in terms of, do I have a fever? Is my recovery sleep not adding up? And now kind of ramping up. So in Aura's case, funding kind of came in the midst of that, kind of right before, and then subsequently crossing the million ring mark, now getting into this growth phase. So it seems like there's like the acceptance around like, hey, more people want to have this device. A lot of people are buying the device. And as you kind of put it, the healthcare aspect kind of further down that continuum into the future. What are you thinking about as like priorities right now to continue that momentum and get to that place where we can apply the machine learning and maybe make connections to healthcare and some of those other opportunities?
I think the reality is that it's pretty unique in the wearable space to have something that people just keep on all the time. And that's a combination of factors, I think, with Aura. One is the fact that it's so light. It's not something that you feel a weight on your body. It's practically 4 grams. It's like, a couple of pieces of paper of weight. So it sort of disappears. It's like a invisible wearable, I guess, in some sense. The other thing is it has a nice, very long battery life and charges very quickly. And so you don't have the cognitive load of having to manage all that battery life. And then maybe most importantly, and by the way, I credit the founders with this, starting with sleep was really, really smart. And the reason why is because sleep is something that everyone does more or less once a day, maybe more often or sometimes not at all. But the point is that it's the daily habit. Most wearables, I think they started in fitness, they're aligned around fitness or activity tracking. And the reality is a lot of people don't actually pay attention to that, but they sure do pay attention to their sleep. And so one of the things that is most, I don't know, kind of interesting about the ring is both its form factor being so light and so small and so seamless. You sort of forget that you have it, and its battery life goes hand in hand with this daily habit of like, how is my body doing? Let me check in. And so there's this sort of morning moment where people like reach out and grab their phone as they wake up and they look. We see this in our data, right? We see this every day. And they look and they see their scores, their sleep score, their readiness score. And they're like, oh man, I'm going to take it easy. Or, one great example is our COO. He gets to see his wife's scores and he changes his behavior. Like he might decide to cook her dinner that night because it's been a rough night. So there's something here about this combination of the form factor being invisible and lightweight and being more accurate, frankly. Just, if you think about where it's measuring on your body in a place where it can get a really, really strong signal. It's the leading edge of the pulse. It's not the trailing edge as it goes across your wrist. It's not, the signal strength is something like 50 to 100 times stronger here for what's the technology that's used, which is, PPG. Being able to kind of have that combination of the form factor and the seamlessness with this sort of daily habit is really profound. So that's the opportunity that I think sets a foundation for us to be not just sleep, but kind of like this more broader holistic health advisor. And you've seen that over the course of this year. I mean, we've sort of broadened into activity tracking with our partnership with Strava and workout heart rate, which basically works just like a chest strap. It's like as accurate as a chest strap. It tells you how did your heart perform during various phases of your workout. We've extended into reproductive health, cycle tracking. Turns out it's a huge factor in women's sleep, and it's actually different over your life cycle. When you're 20 and when you're 50, your cycle is very different. And we do lots of stuff where we make predictions, right? We can use your temperature cycle to tell you about that. So branching from sleep into other factors, we're looking at heart health, we're looking at stress, we're looking at all these elements and starting to look at the science that would give us the opportunity to be not just a fitness tracker, which I think is what most people think of when they think wearables, but something that's like your 24/7 health companion. And if you really have that data and that intelligence, and I think you can imagine a world where here's some advice for you. Maybe you should sleep more because sleep is implicated in Parkinson's or is implicated in dementia or is implicated in type 2 diabetes. Like those are all like scientific facts about not getting enough sleep. But also we can know about you, right? And personalize to you. What is your baseline? Great example. Our COO, his baseline temperature is 97.1 degrees. So when he goes to the doctor and he gets a temperature and it's 98.6, you know what he's got? A fever, right? And so it's about this really kind of personal understanding of your biometrics, of your signals from your body over time and how those might change. I just think that's incredibly powerful. So super excited about all the places that we can take this. And when you think about the opportunity, I think healthcare is ripe for being aided and abetted by the tools of modern computing and the data sets that we can gather. It's a really huge opportunity. I think lots of companies are going to have a great time in the next 10 or 15 years as we sort of unlock the power of, call it, computational medicine.
Yeah, it's a kind of natural extension or evolution as you move down that path. And maybe want to circle back to that. But one of the things you mentioned kind of initially in talking about the opportunity, and one of the things that's become a focus more recently, is the subscription business and going beyond just this kind of one time device sale. And now thinking about how we build these integrations that add so much value, that and can do things like recommendations. They can do things like get to know you and have maybe content that goes along with that. How does it differ building a subscription business from, hey, we were just selling the devices, trying to get the rings out there to people, and now like making this transition to something they'll continue to pay for?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think a lot of wearables have built a consumer expectation that you buy it once, you use it, you get some value, and maybe you've gotten that value, and then you don't have any need to wear it anymore, right? You think about the fitness tracker where you're like, okay, I now know what 10,000 steps looks like. But I know that I should have 10,000 steps a day or whatever, steps are a much maligned topic in this category, but it's useful. It's true that if you move your body more, like you'll have a healthier life. But once you've gotten that habit, your need to be tracked on that habit is probably less. The difference between 9,990 steps and 10,020 steps is not that great. And what value does that bring? So I think it's really important for someone in our category to be thinking about how do you continue to adjust to changes as someone's life circumstance change, or even as they change during the day. For example, somebody who might, maybe 10,000 steps is not right for them. Maybe their BMI is 35. Maybe they have chronic fatigue syndrome and they need to be able to set 5,000 steps. And then maybe, 6 months later, they've been working out, maybe it should be 15,000 steps. And so this sort of idea of, if your environment and your body and your health status changes, being able to adjust to that. And the way you adjust to that is you have continuous data collection, and you have algorithms that are looking at that data and understanding the deviations from the baseline, and you have mechanisms that are personalizing the experience around the deviations that you detected. Then guess what? Then that really, I think, the underpinning of a subscription business model. It's not single use, it's not single, kind of purpose. It's multi-purpose, it's continuous over time, and it adjusts to your changing environment, right? And your changing environment, in this case, it's your body. And one of the great, like, aha moments, I think, for most people who use a tracker like this, that looks at your HRV, your heart rate variability, and then makes an assessment about your readiness based on your HRV. They have one of these experiences where they think it's okay to have a glass of wine before the end of the day. It's Friday, they want to relax. And the next day, they find their HRV has plummeted, and they look at their hypnogram and they see that their REM sleep was completely fragmented and destroyed. And the app is telling them that their sleep is terrible and their readiness is terrible. And they're like, you know what? Maybe I won't have that second glass of wine, or maybe I'll stop drinking altogether. And it's that feedback loop of collecting data, seeing behavior and how it affects that data, changes to that behavior, and then making that habitual, I think, is the sort of flywheel of health. And that's very much on an individual basis, but I think you can apply that in a lot of different contexts across, populations or groups, to create healthy habits. And man, that's the hardest part of medicine together, because medicine today is just like, we'll talk to you when you're sick. And most people don't have the signals that would tell them that they're on a path that would, that they could improve or change. So I think that's really the opportunity that I'm excited about.
Yeah, it's, as you talked about it with even like a fitness tracker that may be tracking steps, and that's kind of all that it does. We kind of seen in various data that people take it off. Like they wear it for 3 months or 6 months, they take it off, they put it in a drawer, they don't pick it back up. They really didn't make a change, and nothing came from it. So there was no feedback loop and there was no behavior change. And now I think with some of the subscriptions that we're starting to get tied to these devices, it's like we have to provide the value and people are incentivized to then keep it on. But at some point, like maybe they feel like they learned what they needed to learn by wearing it 6 months, or maybe even more in some cases. And to the point around the alcohol one, that's always one that is, I think about in terms of you kind of see it once. It's like, you know, that it's not good for you, but then you continue to have that glass of wine maybe when you see it in the data. So maybe that behavior change isn't happening. But the punchline being, at what point is it, hey, I've gotten out of this what I needed to and I take it off, versus we're providing enough value, or the device maker, the subscription, to say, no, these are the reasons why you want to keep it on.
I think it's incumbent on the service to continue to evolve, right? To add new capabilities. This year, we added workout heart rate and overnight SpO2 sensing. We added the ability for you to customize your activity goal. For some people, having calories in the app was really triggering. So, we have a setting that takes calories out. There's new content that comes up into the app. And I think this idea of sort of continually adding value is really important in every subscription business model. And so I think that's an underpinning of it. But at the same time, you also have to recognize that the person is also changing and being able to react to their changing circumstances. Again, this is another sort of classic Aura one. This is something called rest mode, which is that when the application sees that your HRV is off of its baseline and it sees that your temperature is elevated and it's, you sort of got some concerning physiological signals that say, hey, Joe, do you want to go into rest mode? And then if you go into rest mode, a couple of things happen, right? Your activity score goes away. Your activity goal changes. It starts to give you different messages, starts to give you different advice. It says, hey, by the way, it looks like maybe you've recovered. Now it's time to come out of rest mode. And this idea of sort of adjusting to your ever-changing health circumstance and your ever-changing fitness circumstance, I think that's really powerful, because then you have this kind of reason to be a subscriber, because it's constantly changing and evolving to adjust to your constantly changing and evolving health circumstance. And I think that's maybe wearables 2.0, right? Is this idea that continuous data collection, it's not just about a single purpose. It's not just about a single use case. It's about a wide range of use cases and a wide range of need states. Some people come to Aura for sleep. Some people come to Aura for fitness. Some people come to Aura for wanting to track their HRV and optimize that. Some people want to track recovery after workouts. People come with different need states. Some people come with sleep apnea. And I was just talking to a guy. We have these Aura stories. They're incredible. I feel like I'm so lucky. I get to hear these stories. This guy's like, look, I was having a hard time sleeping and I didn't know about Aura, but I got one. And then I was struggling, and the SpO2 indicator, overnight SpO2, was showing all these disturbances. So I went to my doctor. He said, well, let's put you in a sleep lab. We did a sleep lab. And the doctor was like, wait a minute, this sleep lab, $2,000 a night, and this ring, we're looking at these things, and the data that's coming back is telling us the exact same thing, which is your disturbances. You had 12 different disturbances, different times, that they matched up perfectly. And the doctor was like, oh my God, how is it that this tiny ring that you're wearing on your finger does all this stuff? And, here's this $2,000 setup that I have and a specialized person who runs it. Obviously, he's a doctor, so he's got a bunch of medical education and certifications that the ring doesn't yet have. But at the same time, the data is the data. The data said this guy was not getting enough oxygen. He was super disturbed in his breathing, and that was consistent. And so, I don't know. I think it's really awesome to think where we could take wearables, and I think subscription is the right model, because it incents the wearable manufacturer and the software service provider to continue to innovate, and then to extract the value from all that data in a meaningful way over someone's life. And I just think that's a really powerful idea.
Is it, I'm curious, thinking about wearables and how they evolve and maybe even where they are now currently, but just this idea, is it a topic of conversation at Aura? Like, there's quite a few people I know that wear an Apple Watch, also wear an Aura, or wear
That's
another
true.
device, also wear an Aura. And is it,
Yeah.
I guess, does that matter from your perspective, or is it at a point where you hope that it replaces this other thing, or just kind of,
No.
if they're using the device and paying for it, then it's serving a different purpose?
Do you have a laptop,
Yeah.
Joe? Do you have
Yeah.
a phone? Are they both computers that do a lot of the same things?
Yeah.
They're for different uses. I mean, you're absolutely spot on about the Apple Watch and Ring, because in some sense, Apple Watch is a general purpose device. It's got a big screen. It gives you notifications throughout the day. It turns out to be very battery consumptive for all of the reasons, because of the running applications, and powering that screen tends to consume a lot of battery. But it's a great complement, because if you're doing it through the day, where you're looking at your Twitter notifications and receiving phone calls or silencing phone calls, or whatever application you're using your Apple Watch for, to taking a walk, doing your exercise, tracking your run. The truth is that, like, the Ring is perfectly optimal for the nighttime. because it's super lightweight, it's super seamless, it's got a long battery life, you don't have to manage it that much. And it's tracking, at a site on the body that's far more accurate actually than the watch. And so, in some sense, they're pretty complementary. And people who are really following their body's biometrics, they like to get notifications and alerts, but they also like to get that baseline experience of overnight data that tells them, how not just how they're sleeping, but how is their body doing in a really controlled circumstance, right? You're really getting a 6 to 8 hour period. We hope you're getting that much sleep,
Yeah.
and you're getting a really good signal that's coming off the body at that time. And that's very complementary to sort of the day, which is really about your activity and maybe all the things that you've done. People make a lot out of the fact that Aura is a great complement to other wearables. A lot of people, like the US military, for example, they're running a pilot with Garmin and Aura together because they want to track fitness and recovery. I think the case with Apple Watch is also probably aggravated by the fact that if you're using your watch heavily during the day, at night, it's probably charging, right? Or if it's not, you're having to do a lot of work to remember to charge it before you go to bed so it doesn't drop out at 4 a.m., right when you're waking up and your REM sleep is disturbed. So I do think they're complementary. I do think actually I have earphones in right now. So do you. Like that's a really interesting kind of use case, but it's not a continuous use case because I'm not going to walk
Mm.
around all day with earphones, right? And by the way, I have my phone. It does a lot of things for me, but I don't always have my phone with me, right? And sometimes I'd rather not have it. If I'm going for a run, I'd rather not have my phone with me. So I think we're going to find that these sort of computing devices that are small form factor and wearable, they're going to proliferate and they're going to find their niches and then they're going to start to interact in really interesting ways. We already feed data to your phone where, the ring is a great accessory to the phone. And ultimately, in some sense, maybe your watch is an extension of your phone too. So it'll be interesting to see how they'll play together. I don't think it's a one device to rule them all, kind of world. I think that's a little absurd. That being said, people will make choices about form factor, whether it's around accuracy. Is this really giving me the most accurate data? Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The ring is the site on the body is a more accurate site, but also about lifestyle. I'm sure you saw this, but we introduced a Gucci version of the ring earlier this year. What that showed us is that, first of all, the demand for a fashionable wearable is high. I don't wear Gucci, but other people do. And what that said is that there's real value in that because it fits into their life and it gives them this healthcare benefit. And so we actually just recently, just a couple of days ago, launched a new version of the ring that's perfectly round. It looks like a wedding band. You would never know that it was a technology tracker to look at it. You just think, oh, it's like a nice round ring that you're wearing. And the thing is that some people really care about the idea of this thing being just seamlessly integrated to their life. They like the fact that they can get a finish that matches their other jewelry or their skin tone. Many people come to us because it's this interesting intersection of the functionality of the ring and the health benefits that you might derive from it and the data that you're collecting, and something that you can wear and feel really good about expressing yourself. And there's value in that. And I think the technology industry, in many ways, never understands that. It's always about the feeds and the speeds and the technology. What does it do? And I think Aura is very interesting, on the leading edge here of thinking about how does technology really fit into your self-presentation, into your fashion, into your life. So the Horizon Ring, check it out, auraring.com if you ever want to take a look at it. It's a really sweet looking piece of technology.
Yeah, it was something I was going to bring that point up because you had mentioned part of the value is that almost invisible, right? It's an almost invisible tracker, but the kind of Gucci version and even the new Horizon version is like it's the opposite of that. It's like you want people to see it and know what it is or be able to tell them about it from that like kind of status signaling perspective, which kind of goes back to the point that like yes, of course, but it's also because we want you to want to have it on at all times because like that's the benefit that we're providing is the 24/7 tracking. So there is the marketing piece to it, but there is the other aspect that's like playing into kind of just psychology that like if I like it, I'm going to wear it more, and if I wear it more, it's more beneficial to me.
That's right. I mean, there are people who get married and they use the Aura ring as their wedding ring. But I'm sure you saw this after COVID, there was a big surge of weddings. This past summer was like one of the highest weddingest summers that they've ever seen because, of course, everyone's like, "Oh, I could get together with my family and get married." So about once a week, we get an email from someone who says, "Yep, here's a screenshot of me and my wife and our Aura rings, and we wear them as our wedding bands." And it's a really interesting intersection because, of course, you know what, your wedding band is not something you're supposed to take off,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying you don't, but I'm saying you're not supposed to. And then frankly, it's a commitment, right? It's the symbolism of it's really potent. The symbolism is it's a ring that signifies your commitment to your partner. I also think that it's the commitment to yourself when it's an Oura ring. It's like it's my commitment to taking care of myself and maybe even for my partner. I mean, you would be surprised, maybe you wouldn't, but a lot of women buy Oura rings for their husbands because they will, who's the chief medical officer in any family? Usually, not every family, but in some families, the mother or the female or whoever's playing that role is someone who's in charge of the healthcare of everybody, usually the kids, the house of the husband, and it's push that onto them. So, and they're like, I don't wear rings. Well, but you wear a wedding ring. Okay, I'll put the Oura ring on. So it is interesting because it's a potent symbolism, but I think it's also, there are very few things that you wear all the time. And one of them actually turns out is a ring.
Yeah, I think if you haven't already, that's one to run by the marketing team. I think you just wrote the next ad, the ring for us, but also for our health and for my health and buying it
Yeah.
for my spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point well taken. I think yeah, it's that kind of investment and your own health is in many ways to your family and to your loved one or partner. So yeah, I think there's like I said, run that by the marketing team.
COVID, has blown the covers off that, right? I mean, you made the point earlier, but it's really worth repeating, which is like COVID taught everybody on the planet that their health is fragile,
Mm,
right? And their life and livelihood is dependent on their health. And in many ways, like you need to be thoughtful about that. And some people took that message really seriously and some people ignored it. But the fact is that I think we've gone through a cultural moment. Add to that all the stress and strain that COVID put on everybody, lots of people lost sleep. And so now they're thinking, how do I improve my sleep? Or, geez, sleep, it used to be people only, a small subset of the population worried about sleep. I think we all worry about our sleep. Take the stock market today, I'm looking at the stock market. I know I'm not going to sleep well tonight as a result, but I want to, I want to improve it. And then ultimately, the sort of consciousness of mental health has really, in the last couple of years, I mean, we're in the middle of a mental health crisis. I'm sure you know that with teens and young adults, and then everybody is going through a lot of pressure. It's been completely normalized. People can talk about mental health now. And one of the things that like understanding the links between your mental health and your physiology, wow, if more people knew that they could go for a walk and do some deep breathing exercises and actually improve their mental health, boy, that's a huge improvement. You look at the success of Calm and Headspace. They've made a giant business out of teaching people that lesson. And so I think we have similar opportunities as we look across all the surfaces of health. But COVID, in some sense, it did the biggest favor for this industry. Your newsletter included. I'm sure you more subscribers post COVID than you did pre. So it's a big change.
And as you maybe a couple more questions before we get you out of here, down that path, you talked about the kind of healthcare and data driven, medical system and Aura playing a role in that and wearables in general playing a role in that. How far off do you think that is? There have been obviously the hurdles with like the traditional medical and healthcare system, bureaucracy, red tape, like we're not going to use these things. We don't trust these things to some extent. They're not accessible for all people, right? In terms of cost and upkeep and all of that. But it's certainly trending in that direction. More people are wearing them. There's a ton of data that's out there. How does it get implemented? And is that on some type of timeline that you guys look at and point to?
Yeah, I think that this is actually a challenge that the entire industry needs to rise to, because I agree with your premise, which is that the healthcare industry is not going to move quickly here. But the thing that does move them is science, right? And, the more you invest in science, it illustrates and demonstrates the efficacy of, I don't know, improving sleep and its impact on reducing incidence of type 2 diabetes or improving exercise and improving the impact that has on dementia and mental health later in life. If the medical industry, broadly read, sees the science, they will follow the efficacy of science. So that's the first thing. And we're science led. We have a very significant, large investment in science. We're constantly working with third parties, with research universities, with our own science team to do research to provide that data, which I think is the key to unlocking the change. Is there a timeline? I don't know. I always think that the future is already here, Joe. It's already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right?
Mhm.
Meaning that there are doctors who run concierge medical practices and businesses that have been built on the back of this who use the Aura ring and the telemetry coming off someone's body to help and manage their patients. Like that's today. Now, is it subsidized by big healthcare and insurers? No, it's not. And I think that's probably where ultimately all this goes, is that it becomes more accessible to people because the medical science and call it the financial benefit to an insurer who realizes that if he gets or they get their members to be more healthy and make more healthier choices, they will reduce their costs in the long term. And so they have a very strong profit motive to do that. I think it's all here today. It's just not evenly distributed. And so we see this. We see examples where in some countries, US is, in many ways a laggard, I think, in terms of innovating around healthcare. But in some countries, you see people who are leaning forward. We have a customer in Japan, which is an entire town, and they've outfitted 5,000 people in the town with Oura rings, and they're tracking them using the software to manage their day-to-day health condition, to understand if one of them might be coming down with influenza-related illnesses, or what the impact of stress is on what their sleep patterns are. They're looking at this data, and it's sort of like almost like a new form of governance. So could be kind of surveillance too, right? So you have to be very careful about the privacy and data implications of that. But like, it's happening. We're seeing that these enabling technologies are creating new modes of thinking about healthcare, which take you from sick care, which is let's have the system bear the burden of someone who's sick, and let's figure out a way to get everyone else to pay who's healthy so that we can take care of the sick people, which is important, and maybe move it to like, how do we keep that person from getting sick in the first place? What are the healthy habits we can foster over a lifetime? What are the interventions that we can do earlier before we realize that someone's got full blown type 2 diabetes? When can we see if they're pre-diabetic? And I'm not saying that the Oura ring can do all that stuff. It doesn't. I'm just saying I think that's where this goes. And I think it is important because, again, I go back to the mission. We're trying to make people healthier. There's $3 trillion spent every year in this country trying to make people healthier. And I think it could be allocated in a way very differently to subsidize this kind of technology for people to help them make better, healthier choices and live better, healthier lives. And I think the outcome is really positive for that. So that's my soapbox. Like maybe that's where we get to. I don't know. You asked me a timeline. Is it 5 years? Is it 3 years? I think we're starting to think about regulatory filings and the
Yep.
ways that we would need to get in front of that. But it's a slow burn, no matter how you slice it, because the healthcare industry, even though the future's here, they're not going to adopt it, in a quarter.
Yeah, but it's as you laid it out, and I certainly agree that the innovation and companies like Aura and broadly across the industry now saying like, "Hey, how do we shift this? How do we turn it around?" And initially it's starting with the consumer focus, and slowly but surely you see different companies who are moving further down the healthcare path, and at some point sooner rather than later, that will be the other way around. I hope that it's starting from within healthcare and hospitals and the medical establishment to say like, hey, we need to implement these things because they have reached a point where you can't deny them. And I think that's where we are now, is still proving that out and pushing that boulder kind of up the hill, and hopefully we reach the summit here soon. Yeah, and wrapping up, I guess, looking ahead. So we kind of looked ahead in terms of the healthcare question. We covered a lot today in terms of the subscription, launching the new devices, certainly the angle with the marketing piece going in with that, and continue to build on the success, as you phrased it, or being in this growth mode that you're kind of uniquely positioned to help accelerate. When you think of what's coming down, in the next, whether it's 6 months, a year, things that you're excited about, or maybe we should keep an eye out for, is there anything that you look at and would point to and say, hey, here's what you should look out for?
Well, it's so many things.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, this is the best part of my job, is that I get to go and like see where the science is happening that's on the leading edge, right? Like I'll just, what are the optical properties of your blood after eating 2 cheeseburgers and 2 milkshakes? Well, I mean, it's sort of intuitive, but we have the science to demonstrate that, like, the optical properties of your blood, it looks a lot like the Mississippi Delta after a rainstorm. And that's pretty interesting because that's a signal that we already get, the way that all this technology works. So a lot of it is shining light into your body and then seeing how it's refracted or reflected back, and being able to draw conclusions and inferences as that's changing. That's basically what PPG is. We have temperature sensors and other sensors as well, but PPG is really central to it. Wow, that's an interesting raw bit of science that, when you begin to be able to see that surge, wow, what does that mean? What does that mean for your health? I can tell you, Joe, and I know you don't eat 2 cheeseburgers and 2 milkshakes. I can just see that. But that's an important factor in someone's life. So diet is something that you think about. I think as I think about the dynamics of heart health, the American Heart Association just introduced sleep as the eighth factor in cardiovascular disease. I think there's a lot for us to do to sort of do what we've done for sleep, which is to help people become more understanding of it, understanding how it might change, how their behavior might affect it, and thinking about how that might affect heart health. And more, closer in, I think we're on the brink of introducing a new sleep staging algorithm. A lot of wearables are in it sort of okay at this because they're sort of trying to guess when you're changing sleep states based on either physiological factors or physical factors. You moved your arm, so you're not in REM sleep because during REM, your muscles are tonic, right? They're not moving. So it's making kind of these inferences. We've got maybe the world's best, sleep scientists on the planet working with us and for us. And I think we're going to take a big step forward on our sleep staging algorithm in the very near future here. And that's going to be something that'll put us close to or at par with polysomnography. Now that's a big claim, and so I want to be careful about that as we do. We're actually doing the testing right now. I have people out in my office with stickers on their forehead. They're shaving the back of their neck so they're in the top of their head so they can put the leads right on the skin. But we're testing it against polysomnography, and if we can get even more accurate on our sleep stage, it just means we can be a better device for people who have sleep concerns. And so for me, sleep is our core, and sleep is this wonderful universal good. It helps your concentration, your energy, your focus, your diet, your mental health, and the long term. And it's implicated in all these long term, cardiovascular health and mental health and Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. And so it's really important for us to really be great at sleep, and we're going to continue to do that. And then we're going to continue to push into sort of the daytime and how people think about and interact with our data during the day. So lots of stuff that's exciting and new, but keep an eye out for that new sleep staging algorithm. That'll be the next big stride.
Yeah, we will, and we'll keep people posted on that. In the meantime, best place to point them just aura.com. Is that the right place to
It's
check it out?
Aura. Yeah, it's Oura, first of all, not Aura with an A. Oura ring.com. Auraring.com. And new design available today. Go for it. Check it out. Start your Aura journey today. You'll love it.
We'll do that. Thanks for making some time to tell us about it. I hope folks check it out. It was great to meet you and chat today.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, and have a great day.